All right, let's talk about one of the wildest corners of decentralized finance, yield farming. It's a space that dangles these incredible, almost unbelievable returns in front of you. But as you might guess, it's also packed with some serious dangers. So yeah, let's get into it.
I mean, just think about it for a second. What if your money, your digital assets, didn't just sit there? What if they could actually get to work, finding the most fertile ground in the digital world and growing your returns, all on their own? That's really the core idea we're digging into. And look, this isn't some tiny, niche experiment we're talking about. At its absolute peak, the amount of money locked up in DeFi, what they call total value locked, or TVL, was in the hundreds of billions of dollars. This chart just shows you how explosive that growth was. But like any big harvest, there's always a price. And the real question we're going to unpack here is, what's the actual cost of getting those automated returns?
Okay, so here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll start with what makes this digital harvest so tempting in the first place. Then, we'll meet the automated tools that do all the heavy lifting. And after that, we turn to the dark side, the hidden traps in the market. What happens when the code itself turns against you? The big illusion around decentralization, and finally, the regulators, who are starting to knock on the door.
So, what caused this insane boom? Honestly, it's pretty simple. While your traditional bank account was maybe giving you 0.5% a year, some of these DeFi protocols were throwing around double, sometimes even triple-digit returns. In a world with super low interest rates, that's like a giant magnet for money.
And the scale of it all was just mind-blowing. In basically 2 years, the total value locked in DeFi went from less than $1 billion to over $170 billion. It was just this absolute flood of cash, all chasing the dream of a faster, more profitable way to do finance.
But here's the thing. Trying to chase those high yields yourself, manually, it's a nightmare. You'd have to be moving your funds around constantly, paying network fees, gas fees, every single time. And you'd have to be watching the markets 24/7. It's just not practical. And that complexity created an opportunity for a whole new layer in DeFi, the automated farmers, also known as yield aggregators. The easiest way to think about a yield aggregator is like a little robot farmer for your crypto. It's basically a chunk of code, a smart contract, that you give your funds to. And it automatically puts that money to work across all these different strategies. It hunts for the best yields, scoops up the rewards, and then reinvests those rewards for you. The whole goal is to get you a better return than you'd ever get trying to do it all by yourself. And pretty quickly, a bunch of big players jumped into this space. You've probably heard of some of them, like Yearn, Beefy, or Badger DAO. Each one is kind of a meta protocol. It operates on top of other DeFi services, managing your investments automatically. And they usually have their own tokens, like YFI or BFI, that let the community govern them. So if you hold the token, you get a say in where the project goes next, which is a whole other layer to this ecosystem. Now let me be super clear. This is not financial advice. But if you were going to evaluate one of these platforms, this is kind of the playbook the experts use. First, you'd look at liquidity. How much money is in it, and is it stable? Then, security. Has it been audited by professionals? Has it been hacked before? Coverage. What can you actually do with it? What assets does it support? Then you've got costs. What are the fees, and are there any hidden ones? And finally, just the basic user experience. Is it easy to use? Is there a community that can help you if you get stuck? It's a pretty solid checklist for doing your homework.
Okay, so we've seen the promise, we get the appeal. Now we've got to flip the coin and look at the peril. Let's start with the market itself. What happens when the prices of the crypto you've deposited start to swing wildly? This is where a lot of people get caught in a trap they didn't even see coming.
It has this weird, confusing name, impermanent loss. And it's a fundamental risk you take when you provide liquidity. Put simply, if the prices of the tokens you deposited change a lot, you can actually end up with less money than if you had just held on to those tokens and done nothing. And that impermanent part, well, it's pretty misleading. Because if you pull your money out when you're down, that loss becomes very permanent.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. Researchers at the UZH Blockchain Center put it really plainly. This mechanism means your investment can literally be worth less than if you just left it alone. The bottom line is, the fees you earn for providing your crypto have to be bigger than any impermanent loss you take on. If they're not, you're losing money.
But you know, the market going up or down is only one part of the risk here. In DeFi, you're not just betting on the market, you're placing your trust in lines of code. And sometimes, that code can be used against you in a big way.
Now, don't even try to read every single box on this slide. Seriously, this is just a diagram showing how incredibly complex it is to audit a smart contract properly. The only thing you need to take away from this is the sheer complexity. It shows that making sure these protocols are actually secure is a monumental job, and frankly, one that's easy to get wrong.
And when that security fails, the results are just catastrophic. In just 1 year, hackers and exploits siphoned over $2.6 billion out of these protocols. We're not talking about small bugs here. We're talking about fundamental flaws that let attackers drain everything in a matter of minutes.
And these attackers have a whole bag of tricks. They can use things called flash loans to borrow millions of dollars for a fraction of a second to manipulate prices. They can use reentrancy attacks that basically trick a contract into spitting out money over and over again. And that's not even getting into things like stolen admin keys or the classic rug pull, where the developers just vanish with all the money.
This leads us to an even bigger, more philosophical problem. It really cuts to the heart of what DeFi is supposed to be all about. We're always told it's decentralized. No single person or company is in charge. But how true is that really?
The reality is, decentralization isn't like a light switch that's either on or off. It's more like a spectrum. A project can be decentralized in some ways, but still have these very centralized points of control. And it turns out, a lot of DeFi protocols have weak spots that might really surprise you.
I mean, this quote from a CPA Australia report just lays it all out there. Even though we hear about unstoppable code, the truth is, many protocols have what are called admin keys, basically a master key. The founding team often holds these keys, and they can be used to pause the contract, change the rules, or, in the worst-case scenario, even take all the money out. So much for being trustless, right? At the end of the day, you're still trusting a small group of people you probably don't even know. And all of these risks, the market risks, the security risks, decentralization risks, they haven't exactly gone unnoticed. You had to know it was coming. Regulators all over the world are finally starting to pay attention to DeFi, and it feels like a reckoning is on its way.
The main problem for regulators is that DeFi is just a totally different beast. Traditional finance has banks, brokers, middlemen, and those middlemen are who the government leans on to report transactions and enforce the rules. DeFi was built to get rid of the middlemen. Transactions are mostly anonymous, which makes things like taxes and compliance a huge headache for them.
But that's not stopping them. New regulations, especially out of the EU, like DORA and NIS2, are coming down the pipe, and they're going to require things like mandatory stress testing and way tougher cybersecurity standards for anyone operating in this space. The takeaway here, the whole Wild West phase of DeFi is probably coming to an end.
Which really leaves us with one last big question. The whole founding idea of DeFi was to build a new financial system that didn't need us to trust intermediaries like banks. But as all these risks pile up and as regulators start closing in, you have to wonder, is this really the blueprint for a brand new future of finance? Or are we just rebuilding the same old system with new code, new dangers, and a whole lot more volatility? The answer to that is probably going to define the next decade.